Question 1, which is 286. Explain the lav of the kifu according to the Rambam. The answer to question 286 is that according to the Rambam, leisakifu is amongst the lavim that's connected to avodah zorah. That's the word. According to the Rambam, leisakifu is connected to the lav of avodah zorah. Okay, now the question is why? The question is why? And the answer is because Koimrim, the different kinds of halachah, there's like a bunch of words, abbots and fathers and uncles and brothers and shvoks, I don't know. They had a custom to shave their head round. You can see it in the picture. The monks, like this here. They dafka didn't leave payas. They made a ring around their head. And by us, it's a say deiraisa bal tashkes. You're not allowed to destroy the payas, you have to have payas. The philosophical significance of this is, shaving off the payas means that what matters is what's going on in your head and in your heart. Having the payah means that what you have in your head and your heart has to translate into an action. And it separates avodah zorah from achdus. What does avodah zorah believe? Avodah believes in God. But avodah believes there's two rishus. There's a higher rishus and a lower rishus. The higher rishus belongs to God and the lower rishus belongs to you know who. So the idea of leitakif is like a gartel. It separates. Like we also have a gartel, but it's a different kind of gartel. The higher belongs to God, the lower belongs to Lucifer. So my mind, my heart, my soul is involved in religion, and that's it. And the Yiddishkeit says you're not allowed to cut off the payas. Every idea, every feeling, every spiritual event needs to have an action attached to it. That's credibility, and that's Achdus Hashem. That's the opposite of Avodah Zarah. That's the position of the Rambam on Baltakif. Okay? It's fascinating. Now, question 287. What are the 4 instances, parenthesis, I gave in the parenthesis, where that idea plays out? Number 1, a mezuzah. Number 2, a tzitzeh. Number 3, a payah. And number 4, a payah in a field, which is a mitzvah say de'erais.
What's 2? Are there any more?
There may be. This is something that I've thought about a lot. There may be, but I can't think of them.
What's
a tzitzeh? Tzitzes on a beged. You have a garment full of blue wool, you have to have a thread. You have a room full of sefer Torah, you have to have a mezuzah. Rabbi Tzakanik was listening to the shir yesterday. He says, what's the source of all this stuff? So first I told him classically, I made it up, yeah? But it's a Maimonim and Koirach. The Maimonim, Ayin Tes, I think, from the Rebbe Rashab. Maimonim and Koirach that explain it. Koirach's whole issue was spirituality. I have a room full of sefer Torahs. I need a mezuzah on the door. How many times you have Shma Yisrael in a room full of sefer Torah? Have a beged which is entirely made from blue wool. I have to put one thread on the edge of blue. The Moshe said, yeah, it doesn't make sense. It's not logical.
What is it for again?
Why are you saying beged of blue wool? You mean a 4-quarter beged?
See, the rice of tzitzis, it's hard to answer with your question. Your question is better than the answer, but in the Torah it says psil techelis. Psil techelis, a thread of blue.
So,
because it says on the corner.
So his argument was, you're wearing a beged from some other material, you put a thread of techelis. But if the whole beged is techelis, well, I need one more thread. That's the time, I need one more thread. The philosophy behind it is, if I'm so deeply involved in spirituality, I mamish have to do the mitzvah, I got to do it. And the answer is you must. It's not only you must because Hashem said you must, because that's the credibility of the spirituality that affects your practical life. So just one more time. The mezuzah on the door, the tzitzah on a beged, the payah on a head, and the payah in the field. Go ahead.
We used to discuss this, you said yesterday, that people can learn so much they don't have to do mitzvahs.
Oh, so he asked me that. And so let's be careful. Teirasa yumnasa in the standard understanding is mechuyev and mitzvahs is only part from tefillah. Mechuyev and mitzvahs is only part from tefillah. And the logic is, krishma is ratzu, krishma is running to Hashem. The ratzu has to be balanced by yeshuv. Most people do not have a shuv in Torah, so they have to daven. And davening is hamshacha to bring Hashem down. A yidus teirasa yumnasa, so his Torah gives him physical parnasa. So his learning has a shuv in the world, so he doesn't need to daven. That's the standard understanding of Torah Yom Nasa. The Rebbe has a maimer that I remember the Rebbe saying, and I've since seen it in the memes, in my years in yeshiva, that Rashbi's madreg of Torah Yom Nasa is part of a mitzvah. The logic to that is that his Torah accomplished something in the physical world. It's the same logic. that since his Torah was at such a high level, it affected the physical world directly. But mainly, he didn't need a shuv. But that's atypical. That's not the normal. Even in Torah Nosei, it's not typical. You understand? Okay, Rabotai. Question 288. Who questions this in two areas? What's the answer? Kairach. Who questions two areas? Kairach. Kairach questioned it by saying, if the room was full of Sefer Torah, why? In other words, trying to argue against Moshe Rabbeinu, that doesn't make sense. And this is the part, whether you're at the highest level or you're on the lowest level, you got to do the mitzvah. You got to do the mitzvah. And that's tzitzis, Rabbi said. That's the third Pasha Krishma. Why was he wrong? And the answer is because everything has to come down into an action for various reasons. The first of which is if you have God on the higher levels of yourself and you don't have God in the lower levels of yourself, you have made a division, which is a concept of Avodah Zarah. It has to come until action.
Why was he wrong? Sorry.
So on the higher levels he's wrong because if you have something that's very spiritually sophisticated and it doesn't come down to action, it means there's a separation in you. My upper part belongs to God, my lower part does not belong to God, and that's what Avodah Zarah is, division.
When did he question this?
The story of Kairach, Vayikach Kairach. Rashi brings in a Chumash that the end of Shlach is the Pash of Tzitzis. So he starts Kairach with this question: and even when you're in the lower, forget, when you're in the lowest level, it's more important. The credibility of Yiddishkeit is action. We still exist because Yidden did mitzvahs and they were not in the mood. Don't kid yourself. We still exist because Yidden kept Shabbos and kosher and mikvah and tefillin when they didn't want to. That's what the tzitzit represents. Even if your head is full of knowledge, you have to do the mitzvah. And if chas v'sholom, your head is not full of knowledge, at least do the mitzvah. You understand? It speaks to everybody. 290, how does this play out in our lives? I mean, yesterday when I wrote the questions, I knew what each question means. I guess it means that we need to appreciate that you got to do the mitzvah, whether you're in the mood or you're not in the mood. And that's what keeps us Yidden. What keeps us Yidden is that you do the mitzvah whether you want to or you don't want to. Oh, okay. Probably the answer to question 290 is, how does this play out in our lives? That even though the whole world has the Bible, Goyim do not have the Shulchan Aruch. They don't have the Torah Sheba'al Peh. The Bible was written over 3,000 years ago. The whole world embraces the Bible. But for 1,500 years, for half of our history, what we call Halachic Judaism, the Mishnah and the Gemara and then the Goinim and the Rishonim and the Achreinim were oral, were Baal Peh. And it keeps Yiddishkeit exclusively to us. Dafka Yidden don't only have spirituality and meditation, they have action. And question 291 is in the davening of Shabbos. How does this play out? That we say every Shabbos in the morning, Shabbos was not given to Goyim. Right? There so many Goyim will keep the Sabbath, and they moved it to Sunday or to Tuesday or to Wednesday or to Friday or to I don't know when it is. But they don't have mitzvahs. They don't have the Lametes Malachas of Shabbos. They don't have Kiddush. They don't have the actionable side of Shabbos. In the Torah it says many times Shabbos. I forgot the number, but it's brought in Sfarim. One thing is written 49 times. I think Yetzias Mitzrayim is written 49 times, and Shabbos is written maybe 32 times. Many times you have Shabbos in the Torah. It says again and again, keep Shabbos, keep Shabbos, keep Shabbos. Never tells you how. This you have to learn Baal Peh. And the Baal Peh is what we have, and Lahavdil the world doesn't, which is the actionable side of Shabbos. Okay? We say VaYomer to make what point? The answer is going to be to make 2 points. The first reason we say VaYomer is to emphasize you got to do the mitzvahs. Holiness and spirituality is not enough. Holiness and spirituality is not enough. You got to do the mitzvahs actionably. Okay? Who needs to hear this? The greatest Jew who is very spiritual, who should know that he shouldn't stay with the spirituality. And the simplest Jew who has no spirituality, who should know that in doing the mitzvah he has spirituality. It speaks to everybody. The holiest Jew thinks, the Rebbe used to mention this in the Fabrengens in the early years of Tefillin, that there were Jews in Spain who were big philosophers. And they decided that if you know what the mitzvahs mean, you don't need to do the ritual. So I think the Sarmi Kutsi, one of the great Rishonim, the Samag, came to Spain and he found thousands of Jews, who considered themselves frum, that never put tefillin on in their life. Never. Why? They knew what tefillin means. We have to do the boxes. You know what it means. And the VaYatziv is speaking to them. Excuse me. You have to do the mitzvah. That's the credibility of it. And then you have a yid who has no spirituality and he thinks I'm out of the loop. He say, no. Just do the mitzvah. Do it. Maybe your child will know more than you. Do the mitzvah. You do the mitzvah, you have a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay? Now, 294. Everything until 293, which is how many questions? It's 4 and 3, 7 questions, dealt with the first theme of tzitzis. The first theme of tzitzis is action. Okay? What's the second theme of VaYatziv? Does anybody remember before I read it? What's the second theme of VaYatziv?
The second theme of it, you didn't say it.
I know, but I said it yesterday. Yetzias Mitzrayim. The second theme of VaYatziv is freedom. Is Yetzias Mitzrayim. So we read 294. If tzitzis aren't worn at night, and therefore also, or by women, why do they say VaYatziv? Why do we say VaYatziv at night, and why do women say VaYatziv? And the answer is, cause of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Ani Hashem Elokeichem. Asher Yetzias Mitzrayim Mitzrayim Lechem Elokeichem. Ani Hashem Elokeichem. Okay? Because when you go through Parsha 1 of Kriyas Shema, Parsha 2 of Kriyas Shema, and tzitzis, and you learn that whether you're very spiritual, or you're quasi-spiritual, or you're semi-spiritual, or you're partially spiritual, or you're not spiritual at all, you're a yid, and it expresses itself in parenthesis also, and the parenthesis in doing mitzvahs. So that VaYatziv finished with saying, and this is where our freedom is. Our freedom is in being servants of Hashem. Like it says in the Perek, we're free when we become slaves of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, of course, this is funny. 295. How is serving Hashem making you free? Because in serving Hashem, you must gain control over yourself. In serving Hashem, you can't give in to lust and indulgence and weakness and temptation and stupid. In serving Hashem, you exercise free will. But in order to exercise free will, you need to have the strength to exercise the correct choice. In being a slave of Hashem, you gain control over yourself. Because I'm a yid, I can't eat any food. Because I'm a yid, I can't do work anytime I wish. Because I'm a yid, I can't indulge in any pleasure. This is where freedom becomes. Freedom happens when a person owns himself. Okay? 296. What is my state? What's my quotable quote about free will? I own these OC. I didn't register it with the Office of Patents. I don't know what the word would be. Copyright. But this one belongs to me. Okay? The definition of freedom is that you can tell yourself to do an action, or you can tell yourself to refrain from doing an action, and listen to yourself 100% of the time. I'll say it again. The definition of free. I'm free when I can do what I want. Which means anytime I tell myself to do something, no matter how difficult it is, anytime I tell myself to not do something, no matter how much I want to do it, if I am able to listen to me 100% of time, I'm free. And that freedom doesn't come from eating pizza. That freedom comes from serving Hashem. And that's the word. We're free in being Hashem's servants. Hashem doesn't hold us back. He maximizes us. You think about the Rebbe in Shluchim. The Rebbe was such a difficult boss. He almost never gave a compliment. Almost never. He did occasionally, but he almost never gave a compliment. The Rebbe. And of course, when you heard that criticism from the Rebbe and you felt like a piece of, you know what, so you said to yourself, he's not complimenting me, but he's being much more not complimenting to himself. You know, the Rebbe never ever stopped to pat himself on the back. Rabbi Krinsky spoke about it once. The early years of the Rebbe's Nesias, Yudel spoke about it publicly. The Rebbe was pushing Chassidim like crazy. So Yudel said if the Rebbe hadn't pushed us, how did he pushed us? He wouldn't have gotten half of what he got. Yidden came from Russia. They were broken nothings. The Rebbe built Lubavitch with broken Jews. Mamish, with the Bracha Yidden. My father's generation were broken people. Your Zayd is a little younger than my father. Your Zayd had a father and a mother. My father didn't. They grew up, I think he was born after the war, right? He didn't go through the Holocaust. You know how old your grandfather is? He's 70 or 80, simple question. She was born after the war. He grew up in a normal world. The first shluchim were Russians, many of them. They had so many hang-ups and so many fears. And the Rebbe pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. They became giants. When you meet Yidden like Rabbi Kort from Florida, or Rabbi Feller from Minnesota, or Rabbi Shemtov from Detroit and Philadelphia, they're bigger than people because the Rebbe made them work so hard, they became bigger. Steinsaltz, Adin Even Yisrael, Shavalicht in Gan Eden, has a gewaltige Wort, has a moedendige Wort. He was a very serious man. He wasn't Chassidish in the typical sense. He hated Chassidishkeit. Because Chassidish is propaganda, It's talking a certain way, it's walking a certain way, it's having a certain swagger and attitude, it's nothing. He was not into that at all. He was into hard work. He was a giant. He was a Godel B'Yisrael. If Adin Even Yisrael had not been a Lubavitcher, he would have been a Godel B'Yisrael, Mamish. He was a Godel B'Yisrael. So he said that he wrote the Rebbe a letter, the last Torah he got from the Rebbe, either 91 or 92, that he has four full-time jobs, 4 full-time jobs, and 11 part-time jobs. 4 full-time. He had a network of schools. He was Metargem de Shas. The man was a giant. He was mamish a giant. And he said to the Rebbe, I can't do it all. What should I cut? And the Rebbe answered him, take on more. Now, if that answer came to me or you, I don't want to speak for me and my generation. I don't know how the Bacham today would take it, yeah? We would laugh and say, of course, what should the Rebbe say? We wouldn't take it seriously. Why? Because it doesn't make one iota of sense. A person is falling apart from too much work. You tell him to take on more. What kind of? It's not insensitive. It's an answer that says, I'm making a joke out of your question. That's how most people would hear it. Say, what's the Rebbe supposed to say? He can't tell you to quit. But he understands that you can't handle the job, so he says, take on more. Now you'll figure out yourself how to quit. What to cut. Not Steinsaltz, not Even Yisrael, he was a real person. So he sat down and thought about it. And he came up with a beautiful answer. He says it in one of the gem videos. That if you have a box full of meter, full of chaymer, a box full of material, full of physical matter, you can't put in any more, there's no room. But if you apply enough pressure, and he says 7,000 pounds per square inch, 50,000 pounds, I don't know why he says those 2 numbers, I'm sure it has to do with physics. 50,000 pounds per square inch, the matter will come apart, literally, the molecules and atoms will come apart and rearrange themselves in a more dense way, and in a teaspoon you can have the weight of a ton. There's a kind of a star that's called a Neutron Star. A neutron star happens when the star collapses. Now stars work. Stars work on gravity. Stars are very, very, very massive. And they're full of gas, helium. They're very, very, very massive. And because they're very massive, there's a lot of pressure. And what the pressure does, it creates fusion. Hydrogen. And the pressure inside the star changes the hydrogen into helium. Hydrogen has an atomic number of 1. Helium, I think, has an atomic number of 2. But there's an enormous amount of energy that's released. Every time you put 2 atoms together and make a bigger atom, and that's the light of the sun, that's the heat of the sun, that's the brightness of the sun, that's the energy of the sun. But there's a finite amount of helium, of hydrogen. Eventually, there's no more hydrogen left. So what happens older is this helium. So now the pressure makes helium atoms into bigger atoms, and even bigger atoms, and even bigger atoms. But the change of the constitution of the star causes the stars to, it's a whole series of steps. It collapses, it expands, it collapses, and eventually it blows up. There's not enough matter to keep the gravitation together. The gravity holds it. Yeah, if there's not enough gravity, it just blows up. It shoots everything all over the universe. That's why they say that all the heavy metals, anything heavier than iron, is made from collapsing stars. That's how they understand it in physics. We believe that Deibishter made it. They believe that nature makes it. Okay, now, so when a star collapses, what happens? A lot of the energy is released, and what's left, depending on how dense it is, either becomes a black hole, or it becomes what's called a neutron star. What's a neutron star? A neutron star is matter without any space. Right? What's an atom? An atom is protons, neutrons, and electrons, right? The protons, neutrons are on the nucleus. The electrons rotate around it. So an atom is 99% empty space. But the gravity inside a neutron star is so dense that the electrons don't spin around the neutrons. So 1 cubic inch or cubic millimeter of neutron matter weighs a tons, because it's so many atoms crunched together. You understand? So this is what he was saying, Adin Even Yisrael. The Rebbe said, the box is full, there's no more room. But if you apply enough pressure, the material comes apart. It comes together in a much more concentrated way, and in a teaspoon you can have the weight of a ton. And then he says these words, the Rebbe wanted to make of us what he made of himself. Enough pressure that you reconstruct to become a new person. In other words, he took the Rebbe's instruction literally. When you write to the Rebbe, I got 4 full-time jobs and 11 part-time jobs. What should I cut? Take on more. He took on more. But when's he going to do it? How's he going to do it? Where's the energy going to come from? Where's the brain power come from? The answer is you apply more pressure, you become a new person. Become a new person. That is not slavery. That's not slavery. That's freedom. That's making a person bigger. That doesn't happen unless you have a master. And the master is the Eibishter. A chassid's master is the Rebbe, and the Rebbe's whole Yetzias is bittul to the Eibishter. But that's the davar. The Rebbe pushed Chassidim and pushed Chassidim and pushed Chassidim, and he made us more by pushing it. It wasn't so pleasant. Nobody likes to be criticized, especially not by the Rebbe. There was a Jew, his name was Zalman Garari. Zalman Garari was a very rich man and a very big chassid, but he was, I don't know what the word is, he was blue collar. He was very big lamp. He was a very eloquent and big lamp, but his demeanor was very street-like. And when he spoke very big. His language was very, so he used to speak always, before Gimel Tammuz he used to say, the Rebbe pump it, and after Gimel Tammuz he would say, the Rebbe hotke pump it. Pump it means he drove us, and he made us free. What does it mean if he made us passion bigger? When you see senior shluchim, they're pure Rebbe, there's nothing left. You see senior shluchim, you see people who because of the pressures of their lives, they're completely meshuggah. They don't need clothes, don't need food, don't need nothing. They just need mitzrayim. That's all they need. And it's not the pshat that they're acting it. That's what's left. That's what's all the things left. There's nothing else. There's nothing else left over. I remember I was in Florida a couple of summers ago, the summer before COVID, and Rabbi Avram Korf, who's probably close to 90, came to Fabrengen. Avram Korf sits by Fabrengen for half an hour and he leaves. He sat till 1:30, sat a whole night. And anytime he wanted to speak, I was hired to speak, I was being paid. He shut up and I let him talk. I have over an hour of his recordings, and I took out from the Fabrengen his recordings, and I have just his. It's very delicious to listen to. He's a mamish big chassid. The Rebbe wrote to somebody about him. Yetzias Mitzrayim Emes. The Rebbe is a maven. He's truly God-fearing. A guy wrote to the Rebbe that he's giving hechsher products that are not kosher, and the Rebbe wrote back to him, based on how I know Rabbi Korf, he's a big, if he says it's kosher, it's kosher. My knowledge of Rabbi Korf said if he said it's kosher, it's kosher. He's a big Yetzias Mitzrayim. So he fabrenged about shlichus. And he told his story. I don't have time to tell it right now, but shlichus is not hard. Shlichus means 24 hours. I remember sitting next to him and thinking, really? That's all. That's it? It's not hard. 24 hours. There's no day, there's no night, there's no weekend, there's no vacation. There's 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365. That's all it is. Shlichus it's very simple. 24 hours. I have no mitzias other than shlichus. This was a man who wasn't preaching. He's been doing it for 60 years. He's been doing it since 1961. 24 hours, finished, that's it. After a while, it doesn't become a job. It becomes you. You become a star. You become a giant. That's freedom. And that's Ani Hashem Elokecha b'sheitesi eschem Mitzrayim. Hashem took us out of Egypt, made us His. And in making us His, He empowered us to be gigantic. And the more we serve, the more big we become. Normally, slavery makes you smaller. Takes away your free will, takes away your ingenuity, takes away your creativity, takes away your raw mind. Not the Eibishter. And not with the Rebbe. When you serve a person like the Rebbe, one of the most amazing things about the Rebbe is that it was never about him. Never. He had zero ego. Then he had a small ego. He had zero ego. You know, the famous quote from Rabbi Sachs from England, Olav Shalom, Zechina Bracha, most people are leaders because he had people to believe in them. The Rebbe is leader because he believed in people. Because he didn't think, it wasn't about him, it was about the mission. If you have a mission, and you want to get it done, and you need people's help, but you have an ego, you make sure they say, do you see what I did? Do you see what I did? There was never an I in the Rebbe. That's why when you serve one of those people who has an interest, working for him makes you smaller. But when you work for a yid like the Rebbe, the more you dedicate yourself to him, the freer you become, because he's not in your way. He's not in your way at all. That's freedom. That's Yetzias Mitzrayim. And that's the second reason we say Kiddush Shema. So again, 296. What is my statement about freedom? I'm sorry, I do have an ego, unfortunately. Yeah. Freedom means the ability to tell yourself to do anything, or the freedom, the ability to tell yourself to stop doing anything, and listen 100% of the time. That's a free person. Ask people who belong to AA, who have addictions, any kind of addictions, who are dealing with addiction. That statement it's mamish exhilaration. When people who have an addiction start to work on themselves, and it's hell, it's very hard to work on yourself. And they go to the meetings and they participate and they're honest and they're humble and they accept a higher power. They rejoice. They're so happy about how hard it is to be free. Because they're not a slave. They know what slavery is. They know what it means to have no control over yourself. We also don't have control over ourselves, but we have enough control not to want to admit it, you understand? They have such a loss of control, they have no choice but to admit it. Otherwise they'll die. Literally and figuratively. And then they find freedom. They find freedom. And they'll always tell you, you cannot belong to the 12-step program without a higher power. You have to submit to God. You have to have something bigger than you. That's called the service. That's Yetzias Mitzrayim. Last question, 297. So in conclusion, we say VaYatziv for two reasons. What are they? Number one, that the end of any process needs to be an action, a mitzvah, a tzitzah. And number two, in serving God, we become free. See, this is what we do. We learn it, and the next day we relearn it. I think this is, it's good. It makes it lebedik. So Rabbi say, what I'm doing is, I'm going through the Kriyas Shema, right? We're learning the Maimer. And after we finish the piece of Maimer that talks about this piece of davening, I'm telling you, Baal Peh, what the Maimer doesn't say. The third bracha of Kriyas Shema is VeYatziv. And by night it's Ve'emunah. But really it's not VeYatziv, it's Emes VeYatziv. And Emes ve'emunah. The pasuk doesn't finish with the word Emes. The pasuk in Shlach finishes Ani Hashem Alekechem. Emes is part of the next bracha, but you don't make a hefsing between Ani Hashem Alekechem and Emes. So we start VeYatziv. So in the morning it's Emes VeYatziv, at night it's Emes ve'emunah. I'm not going to do both. And by the way, at night you also have a bracha Hashkivenu, which is the ganze Geschäft. In the morning we have 7 brachas, 3 brachas. At night we have 4. Altogether it's 7. And the bracha after Kriyas Shema is Emes VeYatziv. So it says in some places in Hasidus that Emes VeYatziv is higher than Kriyas Shema. It celebrates Exodus. Kriyas Shema is about Hashem. Kriyas Shema is about mitzvahs. Kriyas Shema finishes with freedom. The whole Emes VeYatziv is about Yetzias Mitzrayim, is about freedom. But the Emes VeYatziv is divided into 2 parts. Till Ezras and after Ezras. In other words, when you look at this Durim, you have there is no logical reason why there's a break there. It should be 1 paragraph. Al Rishonim should be 1 paragraph. In other words, VeYatziv has 2 paragraphs. From VeYatziv until Zulas Chasela and then Ezras. The Arizal writes that in the Bracha after Kriyas Shema you have the word Emes 8 times. Emes. 4 times Emes before Ezras and 4 times Emes in Ezras, and he connects it to 2 levels of Hashem's name. The first 4 Emes is the lower Yud Kei Vav Kei. The second Emes is the higher Yud Kei Vav Kei. The lower Emes is connected to the Dal L'Shoinel Shal Geula of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the 4 expressions of Geula. We left Egypt in past. And the second Emes, 4 Emeses, is the Dal L'Shoinel of Geula, which is when Mashiach comes. A whole bunch of things like this. There's 2 times 4. There's 4 Emes until Ezras, and 4 times Emes from Ezras. Now I don't want to spend 4 days on this. I really don't. But I do want to share it. And I just want to observe. How many times in davening do you say the word Emes? In one piece, 2 amudim, you say Emes 8 times. How many other times do you say Emes? It's not that common. Where do you have the word Emes in other places? You know it, Baal Peh, you know the whole Siddur by heart. I'm sure it says Emes between Moidani and Aleinu L'Shabech. There's a couple more Emeses, but there's a concentration of Emes in the 3rd bracha of Kriyas Shema. And it's very interesting. Mamish, 8 times Emes in VeYatziv and Ezras. Because the truth hurts. The truth hurts. But the truth doesn't hurt because it's mean. The truth hurts because it emancipates. The truth hurts because it's Yetzias Mitzrayim. Like I told you a few minutes ago. That like with the word of Harav Adin, Even Yisrael Zachrei Bracha. The Rebbe wanted to do to us what he did to himself, to apply enough pressure that we should come apart and recreate ourselves in a whole different meter. And then in a teaspoon you can have a ton. We can become giants, supermen. That's how he saw the Rebbe's driving us. That was pushing us, the Rebbe demanding, pushing, demanding. That when you work and work and work, in that work you reconstruct and you become a free person. So one of the code words for this is Emes, right? What, they always joke about a person, what percentage of a person's brain does the person use, and other things like that. Every person, if he works hard enough, could be gigantic, honestly. And not just in one area, in multiple areas. You could excel at athletics, you could excel at music, you could excel at literature, you could excel at math and science. If people worked every second of the day and night, people didn't waste any time, they would be normal. They wouldn't necessarily go cuckoo. But they can accomplish so much more. In other words, the ability of a person to become great. Yes, there is nature, that we're born with different skills and with different leanings and so on and so forth. The human being has the potential, every human being, to become so much greater than he or she is, it's not to be believed. That's what a Rebbe is. A Rebbe, in part, is a human being who just used every gift God gave him fully. A human being, each one of us, if we were not Americans, Westerners, who are spoiled by food and clothing and entertainment and distraction, the human ability to be big is extraordinary. Each one of us, if we used all the talents that Hashem gave us to the maximum ability, didn't waste time, we would be so much bigger than we are. It's not even comparable. That's the truth. And the truth hurts. But the truth frees, the truth emancipates. So after Kriyas Shema, when you talked about Hashem, and you talked about mitzvahs, and you talked about Exodus, that in serving Hashem we become free, talks to the word truth. The truth hurts. When a human being is honest, my son came to me the other day with a shayla da hayem yem. It's nisht as avoida da zayin mit an emes, nor emes alein is an avoid. It's not that whatever you do has to be done with truth. Truth is an avoida. There's a service of truth itself. Truth means, can I do more? Truth is, can I do it better? Truth is, can I do it more precisely? Can I do it with more integrity, more humility? It's very painful. Emes is awesome. Emes is overwhelming. Right? Am I serving Hashem at Emes or at Hashem? Is my avodah Hashem Emes? There's the famous story with Heshel Tzeitlin. I told it to you the other day. He used to drink a lot of mashke, Heshel Tzeitlin. He was a big chassid. He was a shoichet. On days that he shechted, he didn't drink, but he would drink a lot of mashke. So Simchas Teire, once he was quite shikir, he took his 8-year-old son, who was later a shliach in Tzfas, whose name is Aaron Leder Tzeitlin, who is unfortunately now deceased. He says, come, we're going to the Rebbe. He took him to the Rebbe's room after davening. The Rebbe walked into his room after davening, Simchas Teire in the morning. He followed the Rebbe in. The Rebbe turns around and sees Heshel Tzeitlin, and he was good shikir. And with a big smile, the Rebbe says, Rebbe Heshel, was wiltir? What would you like? So his son repeats the story. He was 8. Ich will dienen dem Eibishten Chotsch mit a bissele Emes, and he bursts into tears. I wish to serve Hashem at least with a little bit of truth, and he starts to cry uncontrollably. And the 8-year-old little boy is wondering, why? What's so sad about serving Hashem? Why is he crying? He didn't understand it. And the Rebbe swings his hand out and says, Vos a bissele Emes, asach Emes. Why a little truth? A lot! And when the Rebbe speaks those words, he gave it to you. It's not just words, it's koyach. The third parsha of Kriyas Shema is Emes. 8 times. Emes, 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 Emes. There's a song like that, right? Emes. And I'm going to share something with you which is personal. And it's so many years that I think I saw this, but I'm not sure. I'm 99% sure that I was a witness to this, but maybe I'm a little bit embellishing. I was in Moscow twice, in 1987 and 1988. Tafshin Memchas, I was in Russia twice. The first time was in the winter. I was there, discused and Chanukah. And the second time I was there a whole summer. I went to Bet Elazar, Shlita. He was not Bet Elazar yet. He was still a Bocher. So we were in many cities. We were in many places. And each time you went, you spent 2 weeks in Moscow and 2 weeks in Leningrad. There was a shtickle yeshiva. We used to give shiurim and so on. So there was the shul called the big shul, where everybody davened, everyone was afraid to go, called the Archiv of a shul, which means the shul of the choir, the chor shul, a big, beautiful building. And then there was the Lubavitcher shul. The Lubavitcher shul was in a neighborhood, not near the center. Archiv was right in the middle of the city, not far from the Kremlin, as far as I understand. But the Lubavitcher shul, which is called Mar Neroshta, was in some neighborhood called Mar Neroshta. That shul was then burnt to the ground. They built a palace, a multi-story big Beis Chabad. But I remember the old man that rushed to shul. And there were out the Yidden there. There were Yidden who were worried about their children, and then there were Yidden who were just old. One of the Yidden in that shul was a Yid named Reb Yechiel. I don't know his last name. Reb Yechiel spoke Yiddish. Reb Yechiel probably went to Cheder as a boy. Reb Yechiel, when I knew him, this is 35 years ago almost, Reb Yechiel was then probably in his 60s or 70s, which meant he remembered way before the Holocaust. He remembered the 20s and the 30s for sure. He probably went to Cheder. He was a frum man, he came to shul every day. And when anybody would walk in, he raised the Geisinskis, in Lubavitch Geisinskis, they were cousins. I don't think his last name was Geisinski. He would ask us if we know the Geisins. He always said, yeah. Of course he wanted we should send regards. So if I remember correctly, and I'm saying if, because at this point I'm not even sure if I remember it, Rabbi Chiel was often the Chazan, because he knew Ivre. He was a Rosh Ivre. He was always in shul. There were not that many people on the weekday. There was not that many people in shul. 10, 15, 20 people. It was a big room, the Fiyerech. It was very old. They built a mikveh there. It was gewaldig. They built a Beis HaShchita. It was Besidas Nefesh. He had a funny minute, Rabbi Chiel. When they would say Brich Shmei is an Aramaic. And the KGB didn't know Aramaic. They knew Hebrew. Brich Shmei is a beautiful prayer. I was once in a Beis Chabad, in a Chabad house of not from people, where they read Brich Shmei in English. In English. So they read it in English, that means they know what the words mean. So when they finished reading the Brich Shmei, I got up and I asked, do you all believe what you just said? And they looked at me like I was a monkey, because they might as well have read it in Turkish. They were not paying attention. They were saying it in English. The rabbi wanted them to say it in English so they should know what they were saying, but they were not listening to what they were saying. Because I'm sure there's people in that group who are not sure there's a God. They're not sure that Torah is true. You have Ayrai say Kshait. Hashem is true. Unaviyai Kshait, and his prophets are true. Antu Kshait, you're true. You have 5 or 6 Kshaits. Kshait in Aramaic means either beautiful, like kishutim, like jewelry, or Emes. And he would say Kshait, like as if he was pulling Stalin out of his grave and killing him again. Every time, Kshait, with such kavanah. Why? He wanted to defy the Soviets, but he couldn't, he was afraid. If he would say Emes, they would know what it means. But Kshait, he would say Kshait. It was worth to go to Moscow to hear this, he'd say Kshait. Every time. There's 4 or 5 of them. I don't have a siddur in front of me. I have a siddur on my phone. There's 4 or 5 Kshaits in Brich Shmei. Each Kshait, he would say with so much kavanah, Kshait, Kshait, Kshait. In other words, amazing. Is that what happens when you go to Tomche? You get common sense? Or you get unlazy? So you have, it says like this: the Hu Elohah Kshait, Hashem is the God of truth. VeYatziv Kshait, and his Torah is true. Unaviyai Kshait, and his prophets are true. Umaske Lemeh Batavan Kshait, and to serve him is good and true. You say 4 times Kshait, and this Yid in Moscow would say Kshait. Why? Because he wasn't going to get prosecuted for saying Emes in Aramish. But the Chazal say, this doesn't swear that Malachim don't understand Aramaic, so the KGB is like the Malachim, they don't understand Aramaic. And I remember the impression it made on me at the time. I was a young boy, I was a little older than you, I was in my early 20s. And here was a Yid who's led his whole life in shul. By the time we knew him, he wasn't living under fear. The late 80s, the Soviet Union was already beginning to come apart. But he lived a life of complete suffrage. And he said, Kshait. When he said Emes, you heard Emes. In davening, this is VeYatziv and Ezras. I loved, if you look in the Siddur, by Ezras, after every Emes, there's a comma. Emes is never part of a sentence. It's a statement. Emes. Sho'ata, not she'ata. Sho'ata huwa d'Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokei Aveiseinu, right? Emes. Mitzrayim galtonu. Emes. Ata hu adon li'amecha, omer l'giba. Emes. Comma. After every Emes is a comma. Because Emes is a statement. This is true. Separate the Emes from the what? Because the truth is truer than the thing that you're saying is truth. Right? Atu rishen, v'atu acharen, v'dachayin alakim. Right? Emes. Every Emes stands alone. Emes. The third bracha of Kriyas Shema is the articulation of what freedom is. It's living a life of truth. Living a life of truth. Now I got to let you go. So I just want to say this, and I'm gonna have to finish this. Today is Wednesday. Tomorrow, Mitzvah. Yeah. The word, if you look in VeYatziv, the first half, VeYatziv and Allah Rishenim, which is really one paragraph. The word that stands out is the word davar. VeYatziv v'nochem v'kayim v'yoshav v'ne'eman v'ov v'chav v'nechem v'noyim v'neidim v'adam v'tukam davar. Right? Right? And then you say over and over again, 3 or 4 times the word davar. Now what is davar? Udavarav choy v'chayam the manim nachmadim la'ad. Ala rishenim ala acharenim davar tevakad. The magic word is davar. You have it 3 times. What does davar mean? Davar either means a word, or davar means a thing. Right after Kriyas Shema, you just announced Kabbalah Shema, you just announced Kabbalah Mitzvah, you just announced Kiyam Mitzvah, just announced that this is Yetzias Mitzrayim. And now you're saying Emes. Hadavar. Hadavar can only be one of 2 things. Either Hadavar means Torah, the word Torah, or Hadavar means Yetzias Mitzrayim. And you say Emes Hadavar, Dvarav Choyim V'Kayamim, Ala Rishenim V'Al Acharenim, Davar Tei V'Kayam, Be'emes V'Emunah, whatever Emes and Emunah mean. Davar, the word or the thing. You're announcing that Davar is Emes, which is practically saying being a servant of Hashem is true. Hadavar, the word, whether the word is Torah or whether the word is Yetzias Mitzrayim, you're saying Emes, being a servant of Hashem is freedom, and being a servant of Hashem is true, which means it can't be better. This is true. If it's true, it can't be truer. And we will continue this conversation tomorrow morning. Hashem, thank you for coming and listening. Chazak.